Yeah, we all are. Video games.
Nope, none of those.
Not a ton. I mean, not necessarily a ton of new ones. I feel like the big game these days has been Streets of Rage 4. Jason, you started playing this before I did. Walk me
Yeah.
through Streets of Rage 4. What do you
It's
think?
all the rage. All
And then
the kids are talking
we'll have
about.
some kind of debate. I think at some point is probably how
Yeah,
it's
we
gonna end
probably
up.
will.
Yeah.
Which is the same, because I'm really, really enjoying this game. As a fan of beat 'em ups, this is might be what I'm looking for. Like, as far as, like a combo engine, it's fairly grounded. This is made by a number of different developers, but one in particular, Guard Crush. They did a Streets of Fury game, which was just like this really ridiculous. They mocapped their friends,
Like digitized,
yeah, and just over the top, constant juggle system. It's ridiculous. They did the engine for this, but it's very grounded. Like, it's not that over the top.
Right. It's not ridiculous. It's like Streets of Rage plus some stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. Turbo even.
Yeah.
In some cases. But yeah.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
About Streets of Rage. About kind of like what defines Streets of Rage versus other beat 'em ups, as somebody who didn't really play a lot of it in the past?
Special moves, the soundtrack, in particular, the characters, of course. Those are the three main things that I think I'm looking for. I'm looking for Axel Stone. I'm looking for his grand upper, and I'm looking for that really sick soundtrack as well. And we got, kind of 2.5 of those, I think, which is more than I was expecting. You often get, a game like this that they kind of revive. Maybe it doesn't get a proper sequel number to it, but they just kind of phone it in. But this is, they've redone the sprites. They've included 17 playable characters that you unlock throughout the course of the game. But a lot of those are actually just the classic characters, like the classic Streets of Rage 1 characters. So it's Axel, Blaze, and their original sprites. Yeah, it's strange because you're playing these highly pixelated characters, with these hand-drawn backgrounds and stuff. So it's a little odd. They're cool though, because they actually, it seems like they have higher hitboxes and stuff. So like they might not have the special attacks that some of the later incarnations have. But they do, like, more damage or something like that. So it keeps them fun to play. But speaking of fun to play, yes, the combo system I think is the high point of this.
And I agree. Like that's I think probably the coolest part about the game is I think what they did with wall bounces and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and my favorite thing, besides the the combo engine, and what I think really makes this one of my favorite beat 'em ups in recent years, is the fact that when you hit an enemy, they wall bounce and they don't go off screen, which is typical of a lot of brawlers or beat 'em ups. And you're sitting there just acting like a dope, just like punching at nothing at the edge of the screen, waiting for them to come back into, and a lot of time is wasted, just waiting for them to come back in screen. Anyway,
and sometimes they hit you with that like spare long attack that just shouldn't hit you.
Right. Yeah. Or they charge in with an, and you're just like,
Yep. Yeah. So that shit is gone. And that makes the combat so much fun, I think, for me.
And the juggles. I mean, it's juggles and wall bounces. So it's like you're juggling someone, bouncing them off the wall. They're coming back around, you're hitting them some more. Like, I think that's probably the coolest part of the entire game.
And there's a little bit of depth to combat too. Like, it's not just mashing, X and Y. X is your normal attack. Y is your special, but there's different, you can do a neutral special, like a neutral Y, and that's like a defensive get the fuck off me kind of move. You hold the direction, hit Y, and that's your forward offensive move. You can even do that in the air. Some attacks are like multi-hitting in the air, which is pretty badass.
And that's like Streets of Rage 2 did. I mean, it didn't have the air special.
Didn't have the air special. That's true.
But yeah, like the whole like get off me, and that's what separates it from something like Final Fight, which is like
true.
it's just kind of a keep away sort of move. And with
Yep.
the specials,
So you get
the specials
surrounded
would
by
cost,
people,
yeah, you get surrounded, yeah. The specials cost health
Mhm.
when you use them, but now in this
But
one, it gets you a little bit of, it's like like a white health type
it's a
situations where
green
you
bar,
can,
yeah.
yeah, where you can earn it back by landing some hits after you use it, which I think is
Yeah, which is
a
great.
cool
So
idea.
I've got somebody like Floyd, who's a big brawler type. He's got this move that lets like long reaching grapple. And that'll cost, a little bit of health, but you pull them in and you start, punch them in the gut and you get all that life back. So it really encourages you to use those specials, which
Yeah.
normally in like Streets of Rage 2 or something like that, you would spend a life in that set. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. And
yeah,
I think that's the kind of the depth to the combat. I think is much better, especially than from something like
yeah.
2. Like 3 tried to expand it. I don't think I like Streets of Rage 3 all that much
Streets of
at
Rage,
the end of the day.
yeah, I played through not all in its entirely, but I played through the first 3 pretty recently, like on stream even,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I think I'm coming around on Streets of Rage 3. Like it's fast. Like
I
I
want to
don't
come
like
back to it because there's music in there that I'm just like, holy shit, like this is incredible.
yeah.
But I only remember like the first
There's some
couple of
bad stuff
stages.
too,
There's
really
some,
bad stuff.
yeah.
Um,
Um, but yeah,
but
3 has some ideas of, like, with where they did with the meters and stuff that I think kind of got away from it. And the 6-button support, I think I don't think I need that.
no,
Like
no,
having the
probably really
additional attacks and stuff on X, Y, and Z on the Genesis controller, I think is like you kind of don't need. They put depth in the wrong spots in Streets of Rage 3, I think.
sure,
But
sure.
anyway,
So much
yeah,
faster though, man. It's crazy.
yeah, it is faster. And then 3 was where you could do the vertical rolls, right?
Yeah, vertical rolls. Yeah, so there's
Yeah.
no vertical rolls in this one, which is, I
Yeah.
think is a shame.
I
Also,
Because
what I
I
think
don't
is
think
a
you
shame
need
is
it, right? It's like, dude, it's
you
not
know
bad.
it's what it would be really good for is
Mm.
characters or enemies that have like a far-reaching attack,
Mhm.
like a dash or something like that. If you could just
Yeah.
roll out of the way, that's where it would be
The
effective.
drop kick ladies, I think
Yes,
maybe that
exactly.
it would be
Wait,
good for
tell me more
them.
about the dropkick ladies,
They
please.
They're
drop kick you. They're
they're
ladies that they
ladies that do
jump in the
drop
air.
kicks. Yeah.
They do drop kicks
Yeah.
I'm
and they
into
kick
this.
you.
Yeah.
Yes. Also, what I think it would have benefited from, I think, is a block. To be honest,
Yeah. You know what?
why
Yeah,
not?
you're probably right.
Like,
Like they took so many things from from different fighting games to
right.
expand the systems of 4 that a
Mhm.
block might have been interesting, especially when you have enemies that can block.
Exactly.
Um, and also I think like one of my big gameplay problems with Streets of Rage 4 is the number of enemies that just straight up have armor or will
Mhm.
just absorb hits. And it's like every boss and then some additional characters along the way will just sit there and you'll be punching them and they'll still be doing their attack. Like I think
Yeah.
there's just a real lack of variety or a lack of creativity with some of that stuff where they just said like, oh well, it's a boss, so he's just gonna do his
Right.
thing no matter what, and
Yeah,
you should get
that's
out of the way.
frustrating. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they could have done better than that.
I think there was some thought put into it because some bosses actually do like wake up attacks.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to stay on top of them and just like mash X or whatever, they'll do an invincible wake up attack.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. Like you have to you have to prevent the things that made games like Streets of Rage 2 so like you abuse the enemies in that game. Like it's
Totally.
you play Streets of Rage 2 by just kind of doing grand upper for 35 minutes or however long and then the credits roll. Like I love
Yeah.
that game, but honestly, that's what that game is. So
It sounds like how I play
yeah.
the bouncer.
Yeah,
Spamming the
it's-
donkey
yeah.
kick.
Donkey
pretty much.
kicks.
Yeah.
But I
and-
mean, man, that's why I like this game so much because there is that much more variety. I'm not just doing grand upper over and over.
Totally, yeah, and so I think like they've found some good depth on the gameplay systems
Yeah.
there, but then I think they just don't have enough ideas to carry 12 stages of action.
There's a lot of
and-
repeating enemies, of course, and I think that stands true for like most brawlers, but that's not an excuse.
No,
Like,
yeah, and
they
especially
could have gone deeper with that, I think, but
or they could have had fewer stages. Like if they had tightened that game up,
maybe yeah.
Or kind of even just like I feel like stage length is weird. Like you'll have some stages that feel like they're like 3 screens long and you're
yeah.
done, and then ones that are like 3 times as long as that. Like it's just kind of all
They're
over
like
the
15
place.
minutes or something.
Yeah,
There's some
and-
really long ones.
and I think that that's like it just feels like they could have done better with that. And so when you get past like stage 6 or so, about the halfway point in the game, you just start getting to the end of levels and it's like, here's the boss from level 2 and the boss from level 4 at the same
Right.
time. And you're like, all right, well, that's not fun. And
Yeah.
right up to the end of the game, they are doing like, hey, fight this boss again.
Yep.
And I think that's frustrating. It's a thing that you look at it and go like, well, that's what those games were. Streets of Rage 2 does that all the time, but like that's
Right.
not like
Not
it's
necessarily an
2020, you know.
right. Yep.
You could go either way with that in terms of like, well, create enough content to fill the number of levels you want to have, or trim out a couple of levels to be like, okay, these are all the ideas we had. Instead, it
Mhm.
feels like they're like, okay, here's all the ideas we had, and then here's the back half of the game where you're going to see a lot of that stuff again, with a few new enemies kind of sprinkled in here and there.
Yeah, I'm gonna
And
agree that I think the first half of the game is definitely stronger. You know, they've got a
yeah,
bunch of set pieces. They've got new introductions of enemies, in unique ways,
yeah,
which are interesting. But other than that, yeah, once it starts repeating itself, that's where it starts to lose me a little bit. But luckily, it's super fun to play. That's where I stand with it.
yeah. And I think I just got kind of bored with it a little bit because you just see so much of that same stuff again on the back half, or like the tactics don't like meaningfully change until they're like, well, here's a wrecking ball in the middle of the level, and you
Right?
can knock that around and kill everyone, and you're like, okay,
That's
well,
that's novel.
it's
Whatever.
novel, yeah. And the elevator where you can there's plenty of holes that you throw guys into, which is always satisfying.
Mhm.
Um,
But
you
also
know,
just frustrating if you fall.
well, yeah. At least it doesn't take
God,
a full life. It takes a significant chunk of health when you fall in a hole, but it
that
doesn't
sucks.
actually take full life.
Yeah.
And I think I got really um I'm really iffy on the art style. Like
Mhm.
when I first looked at it, I was like, this is terrible. And then I got into it, I'm like, this is fine. And then after about an hour, I was like, no, I this there's something too blurry and soft about it. Like if you think
Mm.
about Streets of Rage and you think about the Genesis, I guess. That's a hard-hitting, chunky, fucking rough-edged game.
They're
The
pixels.
music,
Yeah.
the pixel, yeah, they're pixels, right? But also like I feel like the hits had impact that I don't think a lot of the hits here have. Partially because, and you know, you start playing different characters. Um, different characters have different abilities, which is kind of cool. It's not just like, hey, they punch slightly differently. You have a character like Cherry that can kind of run and do this like dashing attack that'll hit like 8 times as it goes, and
Yeah. That's fun.
she's actually probably like my favorite character in the game,
Cool.
because she's pretty different
Mhm.
than the other ones, and that's fun. Um, but like, yeah, none of the hits are just that. It's not crunchy the way that a lot of that stuff should be, and so I think a lot of the hits feel soft. I think the music sucks. I think them having a toggle in the options where you can turn on retro soundtrack, and it's just like, here are the songs you liked from old Streets of Rage games. It's just like the
Yep.
ultimate cop out. Um,
Uh,
and I think that aspect of it.
but it's also appeasing the people that like are so like in love with like they wouldn't have had any other music.
No, man.
Like
If
they
you
wouldn't
want to
have dealt
do
with it.
that, you write better songs for the core game, and then you do the near thing of we also made versions of those songs that sound like they're coming out of Genesis hardware.
Okay.
Like that's the right answer there, but that they did not do. And yeah, so it's
That might
just
be a lot for the budget that they're maybe
totally,
working
yeah,
with.
and but like that's but then they've
You know,
also got too many levels, so it's which is a weird criticism, but they don't have enough
what
content to fill the levels they have.
when you first heard that they didn't have the guy on board, like you
Yeah,
said, what are they even doing? So they got the guy. They got the guy.
and they
And he just and maybe he
I
didn't,
know, it's such a
perform,
bummer,
but it's like
but
they
also
got the guy.
they
They
got both of
tried.
both the guys, yeah,
Yeah.
but also I think a lot of the music in that game is whack. I think that even when you get to the track that Yuzo Koshiro did,
Mhm.
it's very much
Right away.
like evocative of
The 90s,
uh
yeah.
an
Like
existing
90s
track.
thing.
Like it's like, hey, here's the boss music kind of flipped.
Mhm.
And that's neat. It's not enough. And also I think the thing I realized that like part of the appeal of Streets of Rage, because okay, think about it. Like think about it in its era. It was amazing that the Genesis could produce that type of music, and you're like, this sounds like actual like club music of the era.
Okay.
That's cool. But when you are doing that with full instrumentation and no limits, then it just sounds like here's some club music we put in. Lots of games have this.
Yeah.
And so like the limitations of the hardware, I think, are a big part of what makes that stuff work. And I don't know how you duplicate that now. I don't think the
Yeah.
answer is necessarily
Because
like
we don't have
make it
those
all sound like
limitations
Genesis
now.
games, because that's not
Right.
that's fake too.
Yep.
But yeah, I don't know. Like I think I came away from that game thinking like this game is okay, but man, they missed the mark in a lot of key ways around the edges that if they had really nailed this stuff, it would be a totally different conversation. You'd be like, holy shit, I can't believe they've like found I feel like they're lacking the spirit of Streets of Rage in a lot of ways. And if this game was called something else and they were like, hey, we're big fans of brawlers from the 90s, you'd be like, whatever, man, you nailed it. This is awesome. But by saying, here's Streets of Rage 4, you're like, okay, like you kind of fucked up. Like, but at the same time, the gameplay is really cool.
The gameplay is really cool.
Yeah.
And I disagree, like a hard disagree. Like I think they did capture the spirit of Streets of Rage. I think they did nail, a bunch of the stuff. They missed the mark in a few aspects. Yeah. For sure. It's so hard.
And it's stuff around the edges. And I think it's really hard.
It is around the edges.
And,
I think the core of it, I think, is really, really solid and a lot of fun to play. And
so would you take it over stuff like Double Dragon Neon and River City Girls and stuff like that?
Yes.
I feel like both those games do
in different aspects. Like I love the visuals better in like River City Girls.
Yeah,
it really comes down to gameplay. And that's where I'm having the most fun is, because when you're talking about, repeating enemies and just like going through over and over again, which is what you have to do to unlock characters in this game. Yeah. I'm having the most fun with the gameplay itself. And that's where, that's why I would choose that over several.
Yeah. I think that the thing I realized that, and they're probably smart to do this in a way, but Axel is a boring character compared to some, and not necessarily
he's a Ryu character.
Ryu's a boring character.
Yeah. Right. And like Cherry and Adam, I think are way more interesting because they just have more movement options and other stuff like that. So playing through the first half of the game as Axel, and then going like, oh, I unlocked Adam. What's up with that? And then going like, oh shit, this is way fucking better.
Yeah.
Like, man, that's that makes it a much better game. And then after I finished it, I'm like, well, okay, what else did they do with some of these other characters? Because I'd gotten like Streets of Rage 1 Axel at that point. And I was like, this is just weird. And then went back in on Mania difficulty and started playing as Cherry and was like, okay, like she's almost got that like that Sakura style, like she's gonna hit 12 times on an attack, and they don't necessarily do a ton of damage, but it sure looks a lot cooler.
It feels good,
and it feels good. Like she feels really good. Like she is much more mobile than either of those other characters and can get across the screen really fucking fast.
Yeah, she can run.
Yeah, and so I think that that's just more interesting, but also like the characters that feel less and less like Streets of Rage end up being like better characters. Like I don't know. It's a weird balance.
I mean, you don't want to mess too much with the core characters and the characters. Yeah. They did have freedom with these new characters. That's where they kind of win all out. I think if they would have changed the original characters like Axel or Blaze too much,
then it's not. Exactly. Like it's a super hard balance. I don't want to necessarily like say, oh, they did a terrible job. It's more that like they're taking on nostalgia and in a lot of ways, and that's a really tough thing to try to do. We've seen plenty of other franchises just fucking blow it, and so it's cool that they found like, and I guess that's why I say like on its own, I think it's a better game than if you try to think of it as the next Streets of Rage game.
Mhm.
I think they capture elements of that, but I think but at the same time, parts of it just feel like it feels like a fan game. It feels, or not in that has a negative connotation, but I mean, it feels like a game made by fans
Mhm.
that are maybe sticking a little too close in some ways and taking chances in not always
Other
the
ones,
right
yeah.
spots.
Yep.
And if they had been able to sidestep that by just not calling it Streets of Rage 4, I think they would have had a more interesting game. But at the same time, we wouldn't even be talking about it because so many brawlers come out
Yep.
that are just like nameless things that like no one pays attention to. So like, obviously Streets of Rage 4 is going to sell more copies. It's going to do more business. It's going to get on Game Pass in a way
Yeah.
that Hot Fury Avenue is not.
I saw that on Game Pass. I was totally surprised. I had missed the announcement completely. Saw it last night. Thought about
Yeah.
downloading it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in that context, like people should, and it's on PC Game Pass as well. So in that
Mhm.
context, people should absolutely play it. I think it's got some ideas and all that stuff, but it does not do the
Enough for you.
it doesn't do enough for me on the music front specifically, and
Sure.
and also like I think it gets dull on the back half. But they made a pretty good brawler that's up there with some of the other ones we mentioned.
Yeah.
Like in terms of just like how do you make a modern brawler, which I think is like a kind of insane. Like I think that's a difficult thing on its own, is to just like, okay, think about these games that were originally very short games that were in arcades, Final Fight and Double Dragon and the knockoffs that came in that wake, and then trying to transition them to consoles. You had stuff like Streets of Rage that were maybe a little bit longer, but still like games you're beating the day you buy them in a
Sure.
lot of cases. Golden
And there's
Axe,
the really dark path of like Double Dragon turning into a really bad fighting game.
yeah. And well, it turned into a really bad fighting game, and then also a decent fighting. Like the
Yeah.
Neo Geo Double Dragon is like, it's all right. It's
Yeah.
all right.
That one's all right. That's based on the movie, though.
Yeah, yeah. So it's good. So yeah, I don't know. I think the brawler stuff has a hard road in a lot of ways, because like those games just have things kind of stacked up against them, and I don't know, I don't know that any brawler has really fully achieved like, hey, we've transcended all of this baggage of the arcade days and all this stuff, and found a way forward. What do you think? Like, you like Dragon's Crown?
Yeah, I do actually. I played that on stream.
That kind of, I mean, by making it like more of like a role playing, like, or trying to add hooks like that. Like, what do you think about that in terms of like, do you think that's a
Well,
path for that genre?
yeah, it's been done. Like, Guardian
Yeah, of
Heroes
course.
done it. So,
Yeah.
games like
There's
Charlie
even that
Murder have
D&D
done that.
brawler.
Yeah, those are from some of my favorite brawlers,
Right.
actually. Yeah, the D&D ones. Yeah, it's a novel idea, I think. But I think for the most part, I just kind of like mashed through that stuff. Like it wasn't that interesting to me.
Right. Just let me get back to the punch and the kicking.
Yep.
And
Yeah. And I do that. I think that's a layer of complexity that I don't think I need in those kinds of games. I want it, and I want that complexity in gameplay, and not in the actual like numbers and stuff.
Sure. Right. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Anyway, that's Streets of Rage 4. It's out now. It's on. I played it on a PC where the performance was maybe a little bit uneven, but I played some on Xbox also. Well, it's like the PC version it's got options like frame skip, like how many frames are you willing to skip to keep the game running, and if you set it to 0, it'll hitch up, and if you set it which is weird because this PC can definitely run that game.
Is that not due to like a network play?
No, it's not. It's not like a frame delay thing. It's like it read like emulator style settings of
Really?
like,
I guess I missed that.
like how many how many frames are you willing to drop the frame rate to keep things running, or would you rather the game just seize up? Seem to be some of the options. I tried it both ways and it was like, But on Xbox, I played it on Xbox One X, and it ran perfectly fine there. It's on the Switch. I don't know how it runs there, but
I got it on the Switch. Seems to run fine there.
Cool.
I got it on PS4. It runs well there, and I played it through the most times I think on PC. So
okay, yeah. I think I finished it on PC and then started fucking around with the Xbox version a little bit, but